Good afternoon. Welcome to this virtual conversation about housing. It is my pleasure to be here, and I'm being joined by my co-host, who is Secretary of Commerce, Stefan Pryor. I'm so glad that we're doing yet another conversation. So good afternoon, Secretary.
Lieutenant Governor. It's truly my honor. Thank you, ma'am.
So we're having this conversation, the discussions about housing. We know, but based on the data we have seen, especially after COVID, what a big crisis we have right now when it comes to housing. So we're going to have several conversations about housing that are going to be leading to an in-person conversation summit of a couple of days, in which we're going to talk with more details about the topics of housing. We believe that by bringing together the stakeholders, the community, and advocates and experts together, we're able to share the knowledge and experiences, and we can find a solution to this crisis that we're going through right now in the state of Rhode Island. Today, we're going to be covering very important topics, which is the Rent and Eviction Relief program. The global pandemic have left many renters on the verge of eviction. And with the CDC's evictions and moratoriums set to expire on October 3rd, we need to make sure that the residents of Rhode Island have access to the assistance available to them right now. And that's why we're gonna be hearing today from the Executive Director of Rhode Island Housing, Carol Ventura. And also we're going to be hearing from the Executive Director of the Center for Justice Jennifer Wood. They have a lot of important information that is going to help us understand what is available out there to assist and to help the community, the renters, and those that are struggling right now. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce the Secretary of Commerce, Stefan Pryor. He's gonna give us some information and let us know about the work that his office does. As you know, the Commerce Department is crucial when it comes to the housing work here in the state of Rhode Island. So he's gonna give us more information about the work that they have been doing. So with that, I'm gonna pass it over to my co-host, Secretary Pryor.
Thank you very, very much, Lieutenant Governor. Thank you for creating these forums, ma'am, because these are extraordinarily important at this moment in time where we are emerging from the COVID crisis. And I'm going to speak to this, but Rhode Island is emerging with economic strength. Having said that, we truly have an enormous challenge as pertains to housing in our communities, frankly, at every income level across the geography of our state. People are struggling as pertains to obtaining the housing they need and desire. So it's so well timed. The question of rent relief is right at the center of this, which is why we want to have this early session following your first session, which was on the community of individuals struggling with homelessness. As Governor McKee and Lieutenant Governor Matos is Commerce Secretary, we're privileged to work in this field. We work across government with the Office of Health and Human Services and its constituent agencies and others to ensure that we have a comprehensive response on housing. Let me note that, as we have in previous forums, that the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, and General Assembly leadership have made sure that we have new tools for housing. So we are creating a superstructure to help drive progress in housing. We are creating a deputy secretary within Commerce to work across government and across agencies and stakeholders to produce more housing and preserve more housing that's affordable for Rhode Islanders. That will help. It will affect the level of need for rent relief, but that some of those solutions are longer term, and this is an immediate crisis. We also do have the first ever steady funding stream for housing production. That's a realty transfer tax increment that was added in this year's budget. So we have a dedicated stream of funding for housing on top of our periodic bonds, our most recent bond being $65 million for housing. These are very good things, Lieutenant Governor, and it's honestly a very special and a very positive moment for housing. but we need to ever do more. And there is this influx of federal funding. Many states are struggling with the rent relief process because it is, I have to say, the feds have set forth rules that are in some ways helpful and in some ways rigid. So I think that more flexibility may be warranted going forward, but we are very grateful for these resources. And I have to tell you, we have the best congressional delegation in the entire country. And goodness gracious, do they deliver, including elements like the small state minimum that ensure that we get our due and we can serve our community. We do need more flexibility from the entire federal system to make this all happen. Let me just say a couple more words on how we are emerging from the COVID crisis with economic strength, and then return to the question of housing and rent relief. Just to put this in context, we've recovered over 70,000 jobs. Rhode Island went from a 17.4% unemployment rate in April of 2020 to 5.9% in June, which is in the top 10 for drops in unemployment in the 50 states, number 9 in the country. We're right in line with the national unemployment rate. And as Governor McKee has pointed out, it took us 8 years coming out of the Great Recession to get to the point of being at the national average for unemployment. So it's a real accomplishment. Moody's has been ranking the states and updating on a nearly weekly basis as to our economic recovery. Rhode Island now ranks number 3 in the entire country for our economic recovery, behind only South Dakota and Idaho, meaning that in our entire Northeastern region, we are number 1 for economic recovery. Now, an economic recovery has positive effects and unintended adverse effects. We have an overheated housing market. We saw in the most recent data an increase of 69% out-of-state home buyers, a 69% increase of the number of out-of-staters coming in to buy homes in Rhode Island. That gives you a sense for how in demand our housing stock is. For renters, the pressure is getting higher, not getting lower. So we must produce rent relief for our residents. So I'm very glad that we are blessed with Carol and Jen, who are truly experts and are helping to lead our efforts, who are going to talk to us about everything that we're doing to undertake the rent relief efforts. Please listen carefully. If you are struggling with rent issues, if you are finding it hard to make ends meet, listen carefully to Carol, who will describe to you how to apply. It's not as hard as it seems to get this rent relief. You can do it. Many of our neighbors are getting it done. Please give it a shot. We're here to help you. And Lieutenant Governor, we look forward to ever improving the system so that it's even more easy to access going forward with this new leadership structure and new resources. And I turn it back to you, my wonderful, treasured co-host.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you for that important information, for your remarks. We're fortunate to have Carol and Jennifer with us today. They're gonna give us more information about the rent relief. And I agree with you. We're fortunate to have the wonderful federal delegation that we have, and that are always advocating for us. And we're grateful for the funding that has come to the state. At the same time, we need to work with the federal government to make sure that there is more flexibility on how we are able to use those funding. That is key. And something that I was talking to someone this week is that this is a good timing for Rhode Island, because we have the whole leadership of the state of Rhode Island has housing as a priority. The Speaker Shikashi has made housing a priority. The Senate President Ruggiero has made housing a priority. And of course, Governor McKee has made housing a priority. So this is a good time for us, because all of us are working towards the solution for the housing crisis that we have right now. So this is a good time.
Really, truly is.
So now it's my pleasure to bring over Carol. And before we go to Carol, I just want to do a disclaimer about the translation. Although we're not providing the simultaneous translation right now to Spanish, we have all these live presentations available in Spanish and are going to be posted for individuals to be able to follow along. I just gonna say the same thing in Spanish. Para todos aquellos que nos están viendo ahora y que hablan español y lamentablemente no tenemos la traducción simultáneamente de todas las personas que están hablando, haciendo presentaciones ahora mismo, pero sí tenemos la información traducida al español y estamos agregando a los comentarios de esta presentación una información en español. Toda la presentación de PowerPoint que se está haciendo, las diapositivas están disponibles en español para que usted pueda seguir la información que se está presentando. So now it is my pleasure to introduce the Executive Director of Rhode Island Housing, Carol Ventura, who's going to be doing some presentation about the important program of rent relief. So Carol, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor and Secretary Pryor. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today, along with my colleague, Jen Wood, to talk about rent relief RI. I believe your staff member is putting the presentation up for us. Here we go. Perfect. Thanks very much. So let me walk through the specifics of this important program. Rhode Island has received $352 million in federal relief funds to help renters pay rent arrearages and to assist households with overdue utility bills. As a result of helping renters, we also help landlords that own the properties where these tenants are living. Households can receive up to 18 months of assistance, 12 months of arrearages, and up to 6 months of forward-facing assistance. Next slide, please. Let me review the 3 criteria, and there's just 3 criteria folks must meet in order to qualify for the program. First, households must qualify based on their income. Applicants have to be at or below 80% of area median income, and that's around $69,000 for a family of 4 in most areas of the state. Applicants must demonstrate that they experienced a COVID impact. For example, they were unemployed or underemployed due to COVID, or experienced a financial hardship due to COVID. One example of this would be increased medical expenses, or perhaps a household may have incurred higher utility expenses as a result of homeschooling or people working from home. Lastly, an applicant must demonstrate that there's a risk of housing instability. That's fairly easy to demonstrate. An applicant can provide a notice of overdue rent, a past due utility bill, or an eviction notice to meet this requirement. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the funding under the program can be used for a number of household expenses. Program funds can pay for rent arrearages and forward-facing rent, utility arrearages like gas and electricity, and also fuel oil. Recently, the program now also provides for a broadband stipend of $50 per month for qualifying households. Next slide. To apply for the program, folks can visit our website, www.rentreliefri.com. Applicants can also phone our call center, 855-608-8756, if they have questions on the program or need help completing an application. We man our call center 6 days per week. So if folks are working during the week and they can't call in, they can call on a Saturday and there'll be someone on the other side of the phone to pick up and to help them. We also have many agencies in the community that can provide one-on-one assistance in multiple languages. And let me also mention that our application is in 140 different languages. The agencies we're working with include, in part, this is just a few, One Neighborhood Builders in Oneyville, East Bay Community Action Program in Riverside, and Comprehensive Community Action Program in Cranston. We're also working closely with Jen Wood's agency, the Center for Justice, Crossroads Rhode Island, and Rhode Island Legal Services in the courts so that we don't lose anyone as they're going through those proceedings. The entire list of agencies providing one-on-one assistance is available on our website. Folks should go there, and periodically we update that list, so folks should check back often. Next slide, please. Now, let me go over the documentation that a tenant will need to provide when they apply for rent relief RI. First, we need to document residency. An applicant can provide a copy of a driver's license or an ID with their current address, or even a utility bill that has their physical address listed. We need to verify their income, as I mentioned previously. And so folks should be prepared to have their 2020 tax return ready to upload if they have one, or pay statements, evidence of unemployment assistance, or other documentation on their current income. We'll also need documentation of tenancy. For example, a copy of an applicant's lease, but if an applicant doesn't have a lease, and many tenants don't have leases, they could provide utility bills that indicate their address. Lastly, we need to know about an applicant's arrearages. For example, a past due notice from a landlord, or even a past due utility bill showing that same information if they're seeking utility assistance. If an applicant has received a notice from the court for an eviction proceeding, they should have that ready to upload. That's important information for us. I want to stress, Lieutenant Governor, that even if folks don't have this information, they may still be able to qualify for this program. People should contact our call center, or reach out to our partners in the community to talk about their circumstances. We don't want to see anyone not attempt to try to tap into this resource, this important and critical resource. Next slide. Now let me speak to the documents that a landlord or property management firm should be prepared to submit. Treasury requires submission of a completed W-9 form for landlords. We'll also need verification of an employer identification number or a social security number for tax purposes. We ask that the landlord submit evidence of the rent arrearage they're seeking assistance for, such as a past due notice that's been provided to the tenant. Also, we require evidence that the landlord actually owns the property, and often we can retrieve that information on behalf of the landlord by going to the city or town tax assessor database. And the landlord needs to provide contact information for his or her tenant. I want to emphasize that a tenant can still qualify for assistance even if their landlord won't participate in the program or provide information. Having the landlord participate better protects tenants, but will still provide the assistance to eligible tenants regardless of whether or not the landlord will participate. Next slide, please. We have a webpage with materials that can be easily downloaded and copied to share with constituents. A one-pager on the program and FAQs to help raise awareness about Rent Relief RI. The best way to market this program is through the people that we've been able to assist, but also through the terrific partner network that we have in the state of Rhode Island. They're the folks on the ground working to help households struggling to pay their rent and utilities, and often the first call that folks in crisis make are to our agencies. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to walk through a few slides on current statistics for the program, and we just updated these this morning, Lieutenant Governor, so we would have the most current information to provide you with. So we have a total, I'm pleased to say, a total of almost 2,000 households that we've been able to help with these resources. And we've approved slightly more than 14 million in assistance for the program. Now we have submitted and completed applications of 3,756 that are still under review. And I will tell you, we are working diligently to clear out this backlog and to ever increase our turnaround time as we go through this process. We're highly staffed, and I want folks to know that they're not being overlooked. If they need an update, they should phone the call center, call our folks and get an update as to where it stands. We don't want people to think we've forgotten about them. We are working very quickly to get everyone approved. Next slide, please. This slide provides information on assistance being provided by category. Not surprising, the greatest amount of funding being paid out the door is past due rent, followed closely by forward-facing rent. I want to note that there are households that are receiving funds for security deposits as well, which is another eligible expense under the program. So folks that are living in hotels or are living in temporary shelter can take that security deposit and then move on to a permanent housing solution. Next slide, please. This slide provides important data around who is receiving assistance. You can see in the pie chart that more than 80% of the households being helped have income at or below 50% of area median income. That's around $43,000 for a family of four in this state. I think more important, however, is that over 50% of the people assisted under the program have income at or below 30% of area median income. That translates to around $26,000 for a family of four. And these are the folks that often struggle to pay their household expenses. These are the families that are most in need of permanent rental subsidies like housing choice vouchers or Section 8 housing. Next slide. Lastly, I want to raise awareness while I have the opportunity about another program that's coming soon that will assist homeowners that are struggling to make their mortgage and utility payments. We'll be deploying $50 million through a homeowner assistance fund. Eligible households must earn less than 150% of area median income, around $116,000, which means we can help many, many homeowners in Rhode Island at that income level. Households can receive up to 24 months of mortgage assistance, and overall assistance by household is capped at $50,000. We're able to provide funds to pay mortgage and utility arrearages, forward-facing mortgage and utility payments, and other housing expenses, most importantly, real estate taxes, and also condo fees. We hope to roll this program out in September, but the launch date may be delayed depending upon Treasury's approval time of our program. We encourage homeowners to sign up on our website to receive updates on the program and to receive that important email when we say we're going live with the application portal. And that's all I have. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor and Secretary Pryor. I'll pause here.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol, for all that important information.
Certainly.
And Secretary, you were going to add something?
Yes, Carol, in the chat, there were some questions that were aimed at helping individuals who may not be as technologically fluent, may not have computer access, or just may need a helping hand. Could you just speak to the partners that Rhode Island Housing has brought on board? There also was some information displayed and some links to the partners. Could you say what can be done for individuals who are struggling, let's say, with the tech involved with applying?
Yes, yes. And as I said, Secretary, our list of partners are constantly being updated, and folks can go to that website to get help from One Neighborhood Builders, our CAP agencies. There's also other community partners like Dorcas Place, the Center for Southeast Asians, Mount Hope Community Center, Crossroads, Rhode Island, of course. And these are folks that have language capabilities that we don't necessarily have here as an agency. And I will tell you that our call center offers assistance one-on-one as well over the phone that might be that little extra help that people need, right? They have the technology, but they're not quite sure how they get the document from A to B. So folks at the call center, multiple languages, and they can help them make press that button and get everything uploaded.
Thank you, Carol.
And just in line with that question, there was another question about submitting the documents electronically scanned. Can they be physically mail their documentation, or can the partners provide the scanning of the documentation?
Yeah, the partners can help with that, Lieutenant Governor. And not only does it have to be a scan of a document, or not only can it be a scan of a document, it also can be a photo, right? Folks can take a photo of that document and then just upload that. And, you know, we're so lucky to have terrific partners that have worked with us over the years. And these are folks that, you know, they work all week and then they work weekends to just be there to help their constituents. So definitely folks should reach out to our community partners to help them with that.
Another question, we're gonna go over to Jennifer, but final question before we open for question and answer is, how can other organizations become partners? What is the process? Who they should be contacting and reaching out to?
Well, they can certainly call us, Lieutenant Governor, so they can call. I can't imagine there isn't a constituent or a partner in the state of Rhode Island that doesn't know Amy Raynone. So I'm just going to pitch Amy Raynone. So folks can certainly reach out to Amy. We do periodically add partners. You know, generally we do that through RFP, but if we see that there's a gap somewhere across the state, then we certainly want to fill that. We don't want to miss any agency that could refer people to come into the agency for funding.
Thank you, Carol.
And Amy has even offered, Lieutenant Governor, and Carol has offered her email on the spot, so it's in the chat.
Right there.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks. So thank you, Carol. So we're going to go to Jennifer's presentation, and then we come back for the question and answers after.
Great.
So now it is my pleasure to introduce Jennifer Wood. She's the Executive Director of the Center for Justice, and she has a lot of information about this deadline that's coming up October 3rd, and how are we preparing for that? So Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. I want to thank the Lieutenant Governor and the Secretary for both having focused on this housing crisis throughout the pandemic. And also to our colleagues at Rhode Island Housing, because what a lot of Rhode Islanders don't know is that even back in 2020, when the pandemic first was really making people in our state struggle in new and unimaginable ways, through CARES Act funding, there was already a prior round of rental assistance, almost $20 million to help Rhode Islanders during 2020 who were facing housing insecurity. And I particularly want to highlight that from the earliest days of this crisis, Commerce and Rhode Island Housing have made sure that Rhode Islanders struggling with housing insecurity also have access to legal support, because that's critically important. Those who become ensnared in the kind of downward spiral and are moving toward eviction, sometimes getting good legal advice at a critical stage in that process can reverse that spiral and can actually stabilize housing for people who might otherwise find themselves confronting homelessness. So the fact that in Rhode Island, which makes us within probably the top third of states in the United States who have really attended to this issue by both providing the rental assistance that landlords and tenants so desperately have needed during this crisis, but also giving tenants access to legal advice and legal support, because these cases are moving through the court system. There's a lot of confusion, and addressing itself to the CDC moratorium, there's a lot of confusion about whether evictions are happening in America during the pandemic. So that's what I'd like to turn to next and address through the presentation. But I really wanted to thank Commerce and Rhode Island Housing and the Lieutenant Governor for emphasizing that critical element of making sure that Rhode Islanders get the legal advice they need to know how to navigate these systems, which can be very frightening at all times, but certainly more frightening during a pandemic. So if we move to the first slide in my presentation, there's been a lot of confusion among the general public about, is there an eviction moratorium? Who does it protect? when is it in effect, and how does it work? So basically, in Rhode Island, Rhode Islanders since September of 2020 have been protected by a federal Center for Disease Control partial eviction moratorium. And the Center for Disease Control, which is our nation's leading public health agency, during 2020 in September, put in effect a partial ban on evictions for those who were facing eviction due to non-payment of rent. So they're linking it to the economic impact of the pandemic and stating that people who are unable to pay their rent due to the impacts of the pandemic should be protected from being moved out. The justification for that was to protect everyone's health. And I really want to emphasize that it's critically important to protect the health of families who may be facing housing insecurity, but it also protects the community's health to not have people being moved out of their homes into shelter settings or doubling up in the community, because the CDC orders have really presented a tremendous amount of public health data that demonstrates that it is not safe for Rhode Islanders, both those who might face an eviction, but also the broader community, to have housing disruption during a pandemic. It actually exacerbates the problem of spreading the disease in our community. And that's what the moratorium is designed to protect against. So if we could go to the next slide. Basically, the CDC moratorium does not prevent evictions from being filed and being ruled on in courts. And that's a great misconception. It's something I really want to emphasize, because I think a lot of tenants have the misunderstanding that if their landlord serves an eviction, because the CDC moratorium is in place, they can wait and deal with the eviction afterwards, after October 3rd, for example. That is not true. The CDC eviction moratorium simply prevents an eviction from being finalized by moving a family out of their home. The eviction can still go to court, a judge can still rule on it, and if a tenant doesn't show up for a court date when they've received notice that the court is happening, then they may be defaulted or lose the case. And then the only thing that is preventing them from being moved from their home is the moratorium. And when it lifts, they would then be moved out of the home. So it's so critically important that people be aware that court is still happening, evictions are still happening. And I'll talk in a few minutes about how tenants can respond to that. But basically, the eviction moratorium put in place by the CDC was scheduled to end at the end of July. But because the Delta variant has created a whole new round of concerns for all of our communities, the CDC, based on public health evidence, determined that the only safe and appropriate measure was to extend it now to October 3rd. So if we go to the next slide, in order to be protected by the CDC moratorium, it doesn't apply to all tenants. It only applies to those who the income eligibility basically coincides with the income eligibility for the economic stimulus payments. So if anyone who has received one of those payments over the last year and a half would also fall within the income guidelines for protection under the CDC moratorium, which is $99,000 or $198 for a household filing jointly for their taxes. And the other requirements to be protected are that their efforts have been made to pay rent. And this is critically important, that if there is available government assistance, like Rent Relief RI, the tenant has to apply for that, because the whole point of the moratorium is to provide time for landlords and tenants to access rent relief, to get the rent paid, and to stabilize people in their homes so that the public's health can be protected. This protection also only applies to evictions that are for non-payment of rent. And if you go to the next slide, just to explain, because we get hundreds of calls and people are very concerned and confused about the difference between a non-payment eviction and other kinds of evictions. Not all evictions are filed for non-payment of rent. Sometimes a tenant may even be up to date on their rent, and the landlord is filing an eviction to terminate the tenancy. Under Rhode Island law, given adequate notice, and it's usually 30 days notice for depending upon the kind of lease there is or whether it's a month-to-month tenancy. But basically, with adequate notice, a landlord can go to court to terminate a tenancy for any reason that is not discriminatory. It doesn't have to be that the tenant was behind on rent. So the purpose of the CDC moratorium was to protect people who were having economic insecurity due to the pandemic, and therefore it is linked to non-payment cases. I want to emphasize that all tenants should apply for rent relief if they're behind on their rent. It doesn't matter what kind of eviction was filed against you, you should still try and get the help and get the rent paid. And as attorneys representing tenants, we can often stabilize the tenancy and restore the tenancy even if the eviction that was filed is not a non-payment eviction. If we can get the rent paid and work out a settlement with the landlord, the best thing to do is to apply for that assistance, because regardless of the type of eviction, it's going to be one of the most powerful tools to resolve the issue. So if we go to the next slide, my top recommendation as an attorney who practices in this area and in speaking with our colleagues across the board who represent landlords and tenants is contact Rent Relief RI. These funds are available to pay rent and to pay back utility bills back to April of 2020. This is a very important and significant program. Our economy needs it, landlords need it, our utilities need it, and our tenants need it. This is the thing that can help to stabilize very vulnerable aspects of the economic harm that has emerged during this pandemic. And I want to also emphasize, there have been a lot of questions about the digital divide and internet access. Certainly, we're very tuned into that because we're helping our clients apply for rent relief every day, all day. And really, I think that unless you are an individual who's frequently engaging with the internet due to your work or other, just in the generation that are digital natives, go to an assister. We do the scanning, we do the uploading, we sit with clients and assist clients through every step of the process. And I know that our community partners at CAP agencies, at public libraries, other community agencies are assisting individuals. Don't try and go it alone. If you reach a barrier in the application process and become frustrated, there are assisters out here to help you. We at the Center for Justice, our colleagues at Rhode Island Legal Services, check in with Rhode Island Housing and find out who the nearest assister is to you. Go to the website and look for agencies that can help, because it's challenging. I, as an individual in my private life, assist elderly relatives, assist other friends and family with accessing various kinds of public websites. I don't want to pretend that it's easy, but I do want to say that it's important and necessary, and that there are people to help you do it, including our agency. And the most important thing that we encourage our clients to remember is do not assume you're not eligible. I was just speaking with some clients that we work with in the public schools this week, and one of them took me aside privately and said, look, I'm really facing housing insecurity. I don't know what to do. And I said, you must apply for rent relief. She was unsure whether she might be eligible or not. And I said, look, if you don't apply, then you're ruling against yourself. At least you owe it to yourself to find out whether you may be able to access assistance. Even if you don't have a significant rental arrearage, you may be eligible for assistance for a security deposit if you've already been displaced from your home. And a lot of people didn't realize that, who I've spoken to. So it's really critically important. The other thing that I really want to advise is that this has been a very stressful period for landlords and tenants. And some landlords may find that they're feeling very frustrated and really feel like they need to take action to get the rent paid or to get their apartment emptied and re-rented. Contact an attorney. Please don't take matters into your own hands. There are significant legal consequences for turning off the utilities or changing the locks. These are referred to as self-help eviction. It's just a terrible idea for a landlord, only because it's just not in your economic best interest. It's not in your legal best interest to do so. Tenants, contact us and ask for our help. Sometimes it can be frustrating. You might have to call back a couple of times. Everyone's working really hard. Don't give up. We're here to try and assist you in navigating the process. Many rent relief applicants are not in the eviction process, and that's where we want you to start. Don't wait until you get served with an eviction to apply for the help, because actually the first thing a judge is going to ask you is, have you applied for rent relief? It's one of the requirements to be protected by the CDC moratorium. So please apply, even if you just had a conversation with your landlord about struggling to pay the rent. If the landlord has said, look, I'm preparing to file an eviction, you're going to need to move, apply for the help. And if you've been served with an eviction, please contact either legal services or the Center for Justice, because evictions and housing law, it's complex. You need assistance to navigate those complexities. And with a combination of rent relief and legal advice, the situation can often be stabilized. Next slide. There are a few things that I've already highlighted that people should not do. Don't give up, don't fail to apply. Don't just shut down and stop talking to your landlord. One of the requirements for the CDC moratorium is that you demonstrate that you've made efforts to pay even part of the rent. If you've been laid off, had reduced hours, you should be talking to your landlord and demonstrating that you've made that effort, and of course that you've applied for rent relief. You will be asked, when you're seeking that protection from the CDC moratorium, have you applied? And next slide, I've already mentioned that it's important for landlords to use the court system, not to take matters into their own hands, but also I want to encourage landlords to be reaching out to rent relief. Landlords can initiate the process. If you have a tenant who has been unable to pay rent, they may be in a panic. It's very frightening to be potentially displaced from your home with your children, with your family, and they may not have the wherewithal to reach out and complete the application. Landlords can initiate that process as well, and I strongly encourage that. It can make a huge difference. And you've heard that up to 18 months of rent can be paid, and that can be a very important economic stabilization for both landlords and tenants. Next slide. So there are plenty of places to get help. I know it, I don't want to sugarcoat the process. It's complicated. We've all heard the stories nationally. In fact, in Rhode Island, Carol just shared that over $14 million has gone out to thousands of families in Rhode Island. We would like it to see it happening more quickly, but I will tell you that the system is working more efficiently and effectively every day. And we're in there working with all of these assisters and with the program every day. On July 25th, the New York Times reported that the state of New York, so think about that, the state of Rhode Island and our population versus the state of New York. As of July 25th, the state of New York had handed out $117,000 in rent relief. So that's a little horrifying. And I'm not saying that we can't be doing more and faster and better, and we're all working every day to make that happen. But $14 million in a state of our size is a significant, significant progress. And I want to encourage everyone to continue on that road of progress. My last slide, please. So my parting thoughts, please stay safe and healthy. We're hearing a lot of information about continuing public health concerns. When you're indoors, keep yourself safe, wear a mask, reach out for help. Help is available. We're here to assist you, but many community partners are as well. And protecting your housing is protecting your future. An eviction can stay with a family for decades. So please contact us to get in front of that process. Don't wait until you're already in the process or maybe already getting evicted. We want to help you prevent that. And with rent relief and with access to legal advice, we see that working for thousands of families. So thank you, and I'll be available for questions when the time comes.
Thank you, Jennifer, for all that presentation or for that reminder. It's so important, the reminder that an eviction stays with the family, with the person for a long time, it's going to be affecting you in your future access to housing. So that was a great reminder. So next, I would like to invite back Secretary Pryor, Director Carol Ventura, and also someone else going to be joining us is we're going to welcome Kim Ahern, the Director of the Policy and Senior Counsel for the Governor Daniel McKee. So please, you can join us. We're going to have a small discussion. We're going to answer some questions. So let me just go to the Secretary Pryor. Do you have any questions from the chat that we is burning that we should go into?
Yes, I do think, Jennifer, if you wouldn't mind returning, there was a question in the chat that I thought was worthy of putting out there and clarifying. A lot of really worthy questions, but there was a question that just said, is the court system of Rhode Island still processing evictions? You did explain, I just thought it might help reemphasizing, you did explain there are non-payment related eviction actions and there are other eviction causes. And I just thought you might want to explain that once again. And even in the case of the CDC moratorium, what's the status of the courts? So people understand it is very complicated and confusing, if you wouldn't mind. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for highlighting that, because it's, I think, the biggest area of confusion that we find when we speak with people. And to make it very simple, the courts are processing evictions of all kinds. Early in the pandemic, all Rhode Island courts were temporarily shut because of public health risk. But since the courts reopened in the summer of 2020, both non-payment and all other types of evictions are being heard by the courts. If you get a court summons, please go to court, because you cannot protect your rights if you don't show up. And a judgment could be entered against you, which will then harm your ability to rent in a new place for decades. So it's important to show up, tell your story. There are kiosks available in the courthouse to apply for rent relief. And whichever type of eviction it may be, getting the rent paid is always important, because rent is always part of an eviction, even if the eviction is for another reason. So I really want to emphasize that. And thank you, Secretary, for highlighting that it is important not to put your head in the sand and ignore the court process, because you can be judicially evicted. In other words, an order has already been entered against you. If it's for non-payment of rent, it won't be executed by a constable until after October 3rd. But first of all, October 3rd is racing towards us. And secondly, you want to avoid that being placed on your record as a judicial ruling. So thank you for highlighting that.
Thank you for further clarifying. And Jen, you were kind to compliment all the various partners, including government partners, in your remarks. But I just want to say, you've been extraordinary through the entire pandemic. You've been accessible. You've been incredibly actively advocating and just getting it done for tenants who can least afford to be in a legal process and who are struggling on so many fronts. So bless you for all of your amazing work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. I'm afraid we're running out of time and we have important questions still to ask. So I'm just going to go to the panelists, both Carol and Jennifer, can you tell us how is your organization getting the word out about the services available?
Yes, thank you for asking that, Lieutenant Governor. I must say I feel as though we are flooding media. So we have commercials on TV that I think are pretty fantastic. We have, we're in print media. We are, any technology platform that we can use, we use it to get the word out. And, certainly we're meeting with cities and towns, we're attending public meetings and in municipalities, we're meeting one-on-one with mayors so that they can then connect their human services directors and their senior center directors with us to be able to distribute materials. I really think that our distribution of flyers through the food bank network will be most impactful, because that's where people go, right? That's, food is another thing that people become insecure about, right? So going to the food banks is probably something we're seeing a lot more of during this period of time. And I have to say that I think, you know, again, I have to go back to our terrific community partners. We're so fortunate in Rhode Island to have community partners that speak multiple languages, that are on the ground, helping people every day of the week. We have, you know, Jen and her folks in the court system, along with Crossroads and other agencies. So we're so fortunate and blessed in Rhode Island to have that level of assistance.
And let me make a brief pitch here. We've been going to community fairs. We did one in Pawtucket, one in Central Falls. We've been tabling, handing out materials, making sure that people are aware of the help that's available. So if you're an organization that's hosting any kind of a back to school fair, family fun day, we've been showing up at those with materials relevant to tenants and landlords, and would be happy to show up for yours.
Thank you. Next, I would like to hear from Kim. Kim, can you tell us what is the governor's office doing to get the word out and in this area?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor and Carol, Jen, and Secretary Pryor for this presentation and for just opening up this avenue of communication for all of us. The governor has been in regular contact since the beginning of this program with the team at Rhode Island Housing and gets weekly updates on the program. I'm glad that Jen shared the comment about New York, because like so many other states, obviously this is challenging, right? And we know how important it is to get these dollars out. And the governor has been working proactively with Carol's team at Rhode Island Housing to make sure that we are sharing the word far and wide, in particular with all of our municipalities around the state. We've organized office calls with municipal leaders. I know Carol and Jen were just referring to some of the outreach events that have been really successful, in particular the one in Central Falls. And the governor's also been very focused on increasing just the media strategy around this to make sure that we're reaching really all avenues around the state and in multiple languages. I know there was a comment in the chat from Heidi. We appreciate that very much, because we're always thinking through ways to increase this availability and access. I think there was a comment about working with HR departments, and so we'll certainly do that. But Carol's team really, like, I think you hit 14 million today, and so that is just so we're so happy to see that, right? I think we're definitely starting to trend in the right direction. And the governor also, just to answer your question too, Lieutenant Governor, recently had a call with the White House with Gene Sperling, who's been tasked by the president with really implementing these dollars across the country. And he relayed directly to the White House some of the concerns that we've been hearing from everyone on this call about some of the program eligibility difficulties. And so we're certainly trying to elevate those concerns as high as we can go, which is all the way to the White House. And so the governor obviously wants to continue to work closely with everyone on this call to get the word out. So thank you. Thank you very much, Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for that update. So I'm gonna go to my co-host. What do we do? We have so many questions. So which one will go for our last question? Which one you think?
I honestly think that what we can best do is one more time say to individuals who might be thinking about applying, just maybe to go back to those absolutely most essential points. What, Carol, if you don't mind, what can they do? The website, the phone number, the partners. I think it covers a lot of the questions that are being asked. Lieutenant Governor, if you agree, let's go to Carol for that.
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary, for giving me the last opportunity to talk about the program. So we do have our website. We have Rhode Island Housing's website, where you can go to our website and link right to Rent Relief RI. You can go to rentreliefri.com. You can call our call center, and we provided that phone number for you. They're there to help you. Most importantly, go to our partners. Look at that partner list. Go see our partners at the Providence Housing Authority or at One Neighborhood Builders. Call Jen's office. There are folks out there in the community to help you. The biggest mistake I think folks are making is to think that they're not eligible. And you don't know if you're eligible unless you make the call. So make the call. I think folks would be surprised at how much help we can provide to them. And don't give up. Be persistent. Call back. If you don't feel as though you're getting a call back immediately or getting the information you need, call again. Be persistent, because this This is, this could mean housing instability for a very long time, and we don't want that to happen to anyone in Rhode Island.
Lieutenant Governor, if you don't mind, a quick
Yeah.
follow-up, because a question came in from Brenda Clement, and when Brenda asks a question, we like to answer it. She's a marvelous partner.
Yes, we do.
We all know her extraordinarily well. And Brenda asks, when there are denials, when there are declines, we saw those numbers in your list, Carol. What happens? Do we go back and try to see whether, in fact, there was a technological or a technical imperfection, or a question answered erroneously, or just another way to help people?
Yes,
Could you just speak to
definitely.
that? Do we do that?
We do, Secretary. There is an appeal opportunity. So if someone is denied for the program, they can appeal the decision of the program, and we take another look. And information on a person's application never disappears, right? It's always there in the system. It may get a little bit stale, and we may have to update it if they appeal or they come back to us. We may have to update information, but there's an appeal process. And so if folks are denied, we encourage them to come back, take a look at why they were denied. Don't just take the denial, appeal the decision.
Well said, and thank you. Really appreciate the tremendous efforts at Rhode Island Housing and across the whole set of partner agencies to make these resources available. It is tough, a tough slog sometimes, and we do need more flexibility from the feds. You've heard it from multiple speakers today. We have emphasized it, and we once again thank our congressional delegation.
Thank you, Secretary. I want to remind all those organizations out there that are not partners yet, we need you. You're out there in the community. You have the connections. Please reach out to Rhode Island Housing to make sure we can get the word out. Once again, I want to thank Carol Ventura from Rhode Island Housing, Jennifer Wood from the Center for Justice, and Kim Ahern from the Governor's Office, and my co-host, Secretary Pryor, for joining us today for this important conversation. We were able to provide very crucial information. There's a lot of information has been added to the chat that's going to be available. And if you have more questions, please make sure to either post it here in the chat, and we're going to make sure to answer all of those questions, or contact my office directly. With that, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you for the next housing conversation next month. Take care.